first indented paragraph on page 20 in the right-hand column, it said, Parliament punished the city for the Boston Tea Party with actions that included blockading the harbor and forcing colonists to quarter British troops in their homes. Be real specific with your answers on the chapter questions. They should almost be based on a sentence out of the chapter. So be real specific with those. What else do y'all have? Let's deal with the articles. Any questions about any of the articles? Webcams, this little piggy, strip search, not the president's call, land grab, taxes, FBI may relax, ERA.
What's the little piggy article?
What was the little piggy article? Go ahead, Bill.
States got money from the federals in order to, by the name of building the highways, but they
what was that called? What was the term?
Pork.
Pork barrel projects. So what was a pork barrel project? Because you're right, what was it?
They spend, like, if there was extra money left from the highway project, they would spend it on something that unnecessary to the
Even if there wasn't extra money left over. So basically, go ahead, you sort of shake your head, Brian.
No, it's just like if they're proposing a bill, then it's like to get votes from certain people, it's like, yeah, I'll vote for it, but just do this for my state.
Pork barrel is basically where a representative or a senator sends things back home to their home district that oftentimes has nothing to do with the bill. So in the highway bill, and in fact you're right, it's designed for them to show that they're good elected officials. This is what I brought back to you on federal money. These are jobs that I created, or post offices. Do you remember some of the things that was put in that highway bill?
Yeah. Like
Go ahead.
caffeinated gum.
Caffeinated chewing gum was put into a defense bill, believe it or not, yes. Any others?
Rock and Roll Hall.
The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was put into the highway bill, several $100,000 in Cleveland, Ohio. Anything else you can think of?
In Alaska, there was a fair or something, a day.
Statehood celebration in Alaska was another example. Anything else?
Sidewalk, Florida.
Sidewalks in Boca Raton, Florida, the seafood plant in Oregon. These are things that really have nothing to do with highways. Why can't the president take them out? Or what would the president need to be able to take them out?
Line veto.
Line item veto. And what is a line item veto?
It's where the president can go through a bill and like sign off certain parts, but take out the parts that he thinks should.
Yeah, so if there's a budget bill, right now, if the president signs a bill, he signs it all. And if a president vetoes the bill, he vetoes it all. Well, a line item veto is basically where the president can go line by line in a budget bill and say, line 1, I approve. Line 2, I like this spending. Line 3, this spending is good. Line 4, out. Line 5, out. Line 6, yes, I like this. And then once he is done going line by line, he signs it at the end and becomes law. The parts that he approved of, but he also removes parts that he didn't, and that's not part of the law. Is it legal? Why?
It was, but then the Supreme Court
Republicans changed it. Yeah.
The Republicans passed it, wanting it for a Republican president.
And then they disabled it.
Clinton got elected, and they didn't want him to have it. What was the constitutional principle that said, no, a line item is not legal?
budget was controlled.
Congress has.
Congress has control of the budget, and this gives it to the president. What's that concept, though?
Tax and spend.
No. You're close, but it's actually not. Something from chapter 2. Separation of powers. This was a violation of separation of powers. And if you remember, separation of powers says that Article 1 creates Congress with a box, Article 2 creates the executive with a box, Article 3 creates the courts with a box. And only those powers in that box can be controlled by that branch. And if the president tries to use the budget power, which is in Article 1, that's a violation of separation of powers, and even if it would be effective, it doesn't matter. It's unconstitutional, and the line item was struck down. It was taking Congress's budget power. What other questions do y'all have? Go ahead.
The assaultion powers, I know that would push.
Yeah, there was actually something that I actually just pulled from that was very, very specific. And it was within the context of separation of powers. And if you remember, if you want to do something major, how many branches does it take?
2.
It takes 2 of the 3 branches in order to enact effective policy or effectively enact policy. Can you give me some examples of some of those things that I read? Declaring war, in theory, it's going to take Congress to declare, and it's going to take the president to basically follow through on that declaration. So going to war might be a better way of saying it. What else do you remember? Passing a bill. Congress must pass, president must sign. What about getting a warrant? The executive must make the case, and then the courts must approve. What about a criminal conviction? The executive branch has got to argue, and then the court has got to ultimately convict. See, when you think about it, separation of powers is basically saying one branch cannot do whatever it wants, but you need at least two to really effectively enact certain powers. Keep that one in mind. That's really specific, but maybe really small. What other questions have you got from articles? What's the strip search article?
In the airports.
Ah, I say strip search and you get excited. Go ahead.
Yeah. In the recent years, there's been at the airports, United States government.
They can strip search you in the airports, or was it a different place?
Just if you're arrested.
If you're arrested, go ahead. What can happen when you get arrested?
You can be strip searched.
Why?
To like ensure the safety of the other people in prison.
There was a Supreme Court case that said that even if you were brought in on traffic ticket violations, that it was actually a computer error. Believe it or not, you can be strip searched. It doesn't matter if it was a violent offense that you're brought in for or something as minor as traffic offenses. You can be brought in and you can be strip searched in the interest of security of the prisoners and security of the guards, and ultimately the state is responsible for the security of you, in fact, the safety of you. Strip search is illegal in that instance. What others have you got up here? Y'all good with the FBI drug policy? What did the FBI drug policy used to be? More than 15 times in your entire life, and not more than, not within the last 3 years. What was the problem with the FBI drug policy? No candidates. So many people were using weed at such grand levels, or so recently, that in fact they were losing the ability to secure agents, to even consider agents. So what did the FBI, how did they change the policy? They took out the 15 or more times. So now, as long as you have not used within the last 3 years, you are considered a candidate for the FBI. Their argument was, we are the premier law enforcement agency. You need to abide by the laws, and if you do not abide by federal laws, then in fact you should not be considered. The drug laws were lowering the candidates, so in order to make sure that they could continue to get candidates, what did they do? They removed the 15 times. So now it's within the last 3 years. It would be within the last 10 years for coke, harder drugs, anabolic steroids. If you have sold, you still cannot apply. But if you've not used within the last 3 years, you can. Any others from up here? There's only one article that we really dealt with that I'm going to deal with you with numbers, to be honest with you, and that was actually the taxes article. Do you remember the taxes article?
Like certain amounts are used for things that shouldn't be used for.
How much does the government say that it spends on average per household in the United States? $23,760. How much does it actually say that the average household pays in taxes? $20,044. And do you remember what the categories were?
Social Security, Medicare.
Social Security, Medicare was number 1 at $78.75. What was number 2?
Defense.
And how much?
For $47.01.
$47.01. What was third?
Low income programs.
Which was?
$37.59.
$37.59. Was it $37.59 or $35.79?
Wow, we gotta know this.
It wouldn't hurt.
Maybe it wouldn't hurt. What was 4?
Interest.
Interest.
Debt.
And?
And then 6 was education.
Okay, 6 was education. And if you remember with education, that was only a few $100.
So it's $732.
There you go, thank you. So it was about $60 a month. Understand, when I give you the short answers, you're going to have a choice. I'm probably going to give you 7 out of 11 and say answer these 7 questions, and there are going to be 4 or 5 that you do not have to answer. You will have to answer all the multiple choices. On some of these, we spent some pretty good time. And actually, let me go to the links on this, because if you remember, we also had the debt clock that we went over in class. So that's up there, talking about the share of each individual citizens and what the total debt is, if you remember that one. And we also, I mentioned to you Nikki Haley and Mike Turzai. Turzai was from Pennsylvania. Nikki Haley was from South Carolina talking about voter ID. So keep that in mind as well. What other questions do you have maybe about articles?